It's been nearly 4 years since the Biden administration worked to reestablish certain groups' funding, namely the UN Relief Works Agency in the Palestinian territories, UNRWA. Agencies now known to have worked alongside with and shared resources and even manpower with Hamas and Hezbollah in their efforts to attack and destroy the state of Israel, namely also on the October 7th attacks. Those funding cuts originally were engineered by the Trump administration, and there's a new one of those coming to power in January.
One of the memorable actions by the Trump administration was an unprecedented cutting of funds. I think the only country to have done that before was the Canadian government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
Hillel Neuer is an internationally renowned human rights lawyer and is the executive director of UN Watch,
who had done that around 2011. But otherwise, that's a relatively small amount compared to what the United States has been paying every year, which is well over $300 million. The Biden administration has given over $1 billion to UNRWA. And you're quite right. Tragically, this is an agency that systematically employs terrorists. Let me say, make this very clear. It's not accidental. It's not a few bad apples. This is an agency that is rotten to the core. Keep in mind, just over a month ago, Israel eliminated terror chief Fathi al-Sharif. He was the head of Hamas in Lebanon, eliminated. When he was killed, Hamas said, "You killed our terror chief in Lebanon." They didn't use the words terror chief, but they said, "You killed our leader in Lebanon." He also, his day job was principal of an UNRWA school, major school, and get this, head of the UNRWA Teachers Union in Lebanon. So the head of the teachers union, in charge of thousands of teachers, was the head of Hamas in Lebanon. That's not a one-off. The same happened in Gaza. Su'ail al-Hindi, head of the teachers union of UNRWA in Gaza, was on the Hamas pull-up bureau, is still on the Hamas pull-up bureau. So UNRWA is infested with terrorists. They know it. We have photos. We have photos of the heads of UNRWA meeting with local officials, the heads of UNRWA, the one or two or three international people like Philippe Lazzarini, who's Swiss. 99% of UNRWA people are Palestinians, but the Swiss head of UNRWA, when he goes to Lebanon, he meets with people who are Hamas. And this is systematic. And the U.S. was paying for it in the past 3 years. Now, after it was revealed that several UNRWA staff participated in the massacre of October 7th, then there was enormous pressure. The Republicans led legislation. The Democrats needed to pass some bipartisan bill to get foreign aid, so they agreed to it. It was an agreement President Biden signed into law in March, a one-year freeze on funding. That ends on March for UNRWA. And the Biden administration said they want to reinstate it. So the Trump administration will come in January. I think you can bet your bottom dollar the Trump administration will deny any reinstatement. The freeze will be made final. And I think UNRWA is not going to get another U.S. dollar. And that's a very powerful statement because more than the money, UNRWA, their budget is little over $1 billion. They could get that funding in a second from Qatar and other wealthy Arab or Islamic states. But they want the funding because they want the legitimacy. And people have to understand UNRWA is not in its essence an aid agency. There are many massive aid agencies that can give out food and medicine and all that. The UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, the WHO, they take care of millions of people around the world. The point of UNRWA is because their agenda, not really hidden, is to dismantle Israel. And by America denying a penny to that agency, they're saying we will not legitimize that agenda of hate and destruction.
Do we have any reason to believe that a Trump 47 administration would act any differently towards UNRWA than the Trump 45 administration did? Certainly, President Trump, President-elect Trump, whichever title we're giving him at the moment, hasn't signaled any change. But I would imagine it would be more of the same, wouldn't it?
Well, we're in a different time. UNRWA was not really in the crosshairs of Israel. This is important to understand. The defenders of UNRWA say, Netanyahu is always trying to destroy UNRWA. Israel always wanted to destroy UNRWA. Not true. Maybe they should have, but it's not true. The reality is that when Israel entered the territories of Gaza and Judea and Samaria in 1967, they said, UNRWA's there, it's managing things for Palestinians, we'll kind of let them take care of it. It gives some stability. And and Israel allowed them to operate. What Israel didn't fully understand was what the agenda of UNRWA is. They didn't fully understand how Hamas in the past 20 years since Israel left Gaza basically subverted UNRWA. So we're in a different time now. Now we're in a time where the state of Israel, as you indicated, has outlawed UNRWA. Israel has passed a law saying that its officials cannot deal with UNRWA in any way. And so the issue is really at the forefront. Israel has now put UNRWA in its crosshairs. So the issue back then, when in Trump 45, there was just defunding, but now it's much more. It's sort of what will be the U.S. policy towards UNRWA in general. It'll be more than funding, and I think that the administration will take a more forceful stand. Certainly in the past year, I've testified to the Congress 4 times, saw the strength of the Republican understanding of what UNRWA is. So I think we'll get a more forceful opposition to UNRWA than we even saw before.
On a wider scale of things, there'll be a lot of, there's always been a difference in how the Trump administration dealt with the UN as a whole, as opposed to the way the Biden administration has. The Biden administration has been a lot more deferential to the UN than the Trump fellows were. I would imagine we're kind of going to head back into that model.
I would say so. Look, the Biden administration, it should be noted, when it came to a vote, in most instances, with a handful of exceptions, the Biden administration voted against anti-Israel measures. But beyond that, you're quite right that the atmospherics of the Biden administration were basically, we love the UN is great, the UN is wonderful, and one could point to thousands and thousands of statements and tweets saying the UN is doing a great job. They were cheerleaders for the UN. Even the Human Rights Council, which is an Orwellian body, 60% of whom include regimes like China, the Chinese Communist Party, which oppresses 1/5 of humanity, the Qatari regime, which is funding terrorists, the Taliban, Hamas, the Cuban police state, which has hundreds of political prisoners. They're all sitting on the Human Rights Council. This administration, the Biden administration, they did try to do a number of good things. They did vote against anti-Israel measures. I do give them credit for that. But the message they sent every day in numerous tweets were, we're meeting with the UN human rights folks. We love them. They're great. They were cheerleaders. That's going to stop.
And this change in attitude that I suspect we'll see very quickly once January 20th rolls around is also going to extend to perhaps one of the world's worst offenders and one of the UN's darlings, and that is the Islamic regime of Iran. This has been the instigator for a lot of regional problems, if not global problems, and they seem to always get that petting on the head from the chiefs at the UN. I suspect there's going to be a different attitude towards them as well.
I think we have good reason to believe that. Yes, look, the Biden administration had a very forceful stand. Sorry, I take that back. The Trump administration under Trump 45 had a very forceful stand. When Biden came in, he tried to do Iran deal 2.0. I'll never forget, after Biden came in, shortly afterwards, I had, through UN Watch, my organization, we revealed that the Islamic regime in Iran was elected to the UN Women's Rights Commission, right? A regime that beats, blinds, rapes, and tortures women for the crime of standing up for their rights, was elected to the highest women's rights body of the UN. When we exposed it, a journalist at the State Department press briefing said, what does the Biden administration have to say? And they didn't want to comment. They refused to comment because they were trying to make nice to Iran, and they wouldn't comment on it. Yeah. So that was the attitude going in. And of course, the UN, as you indicated, the UN has last year elected the Islamic regime of Iran, appointed them rather, to be chair of the Human Rights Council Social Forum. They made them, I think it was vice president or rapporteur of a disarmament commission in New York. So that's the regime, that's the attitude of the UN. The Trump administration is going to fiercely oppose that. And that's important, and I welcome that.
And of course, we should notice that even in just the past week, another incident regarding the Iranian regime and women's rights, a young woman was stripped down forcefully by the secret police, and this was all caught on video and posted on social media. And that woman was left in her undergarments because she wasn't wearing her hijab correctly, and then she was arrested and taken away. And I don't think anyone has heard from this young woman since. A young like college age student, female. A horrific image to see, and I wonder if there'll be questions asked of the UN regarding this, especially since Iran, as you noted, was elected to this body regarding women's rights. Hillel Neuer, you are an internationally known human rights lawyer. Thank you so much for being with us. Your organization is UN Watch, and we encourage everyone to follow you on Twitter. Thank you so much for being with us on the Fox News Rundown Evening Edition.
Thank you for having me.